So backwards. They hate black people. I'll go 12 rounds with a fighter. Oh, he's so boring. Lomachenko go 12 rounds with somebody. Oh, he's the Matrix. The Matrix. I never seen nothing like him. Crazy.
And I'm getting mighty tired of your trifling ways and of listening to that jackass Bray.
So what do I do, YouTube? It's your boy King David in this thing, and I'm back at y'all again with another video.
I know that.
So before I get going on the video, man, I'm gonna need y'all to go ahead, hit the like button, and if you're new here, be sure to subscribe one time for your boy, so we can continue to grow like we need to grow on this channel. You know what I mean? Alright, cool. So y'all see what the title of the video is, man. This is part 2. The reason Dontaes Boxing Nation might be right about SHAKUR Stevenson. You know what I mean? And if you haven't seen part 1, go on and check it out right now before you watch part 2. You know what I mean? Because in part 1, we kind of lay down the framework on what we're going to be discussing in part 2. You know what I mean? We lay down a lot of the framework. We provide a lot of the understanding needed in order to bring you to part 2. So if you haven't seen part 1, check out part 1 now and then come back to part 2. You feel me? You know what I mean? But I will summarize things in a nutshell for you as far as part 1 is concerned, and it goes like this. Basically in part 1, I want to provide proper context to the things that I'm going to be saying as I break down what SHAKUR Stevenson is saying about Dontaes Boxing Nation. In order for me to do that properly, there are 6 things that I actually need you to know and understand prior to breaking down what SHAKUR Stevenson had to say about Dontaes Boxing Nation. Now, because of the wide range of the subject matter that I was discussing, or that I'm discussing in these 6 things that I need you to know prior to me actually breaking down what SHAKUR said, I could only get through 3 of them in part 1, right? And I'll run through them hoes for you real quick. You know what I mean? But in order to get proper context on these 3 things, again, check out part 1. It'll give you the context you're looking for on the 3 things that I'm going to be saying here, right? The first thing is that I go back 7 years on YouTube, right? And I've seen a lot of the YouTube changes. You know, I was there, and I experienced a lot of the racism that took place online prior to this new era of YouTube where people want to be biased and objective. So that's point number 1, right? Point number 2 is most of the guys on here talking shit haven't seen the video that SHAKUR Stevenson was responding to from Dontaes Boxing Nation. That was point number 2. Point number 3 was most of the guys that have an issue with Dontaes Boxing Nation and the video that he put out and SHAKUR's response. Most of the people that have an issue with Dontaes Boxing Nation are literally guys who just don't like the channel. You know what I mean? They're literally guys who just don't fuck with Dontaes and his content, and therefore took this whole thing as an opportunity to attack him in whatever way, shape, form, and fashion they could, even if it means saying shit or spreading that he said shit that he didn't actually say, right? Cool. So those are the 3 things that I went through in part 1. Wrapped it up for you real fast, quick, fast, and in a hurry, right? Alright, so cool. Y'all are officially caught the fuck up. But again, check out part 1 for full context on what I just said. Now, cool. Here we are in part 2. And in part 2, I'm going to run through the other 3 things that you need to know prior to me actually breaking down what SHAKUR Stevenson had to say about Dontaes Boxing Nation, right? Now, as I had the 3, right, I actually thought of a bonus thing that y'all actually needed to know prior to me getting into the meat and potatoes of the topic, right? And that bonus thing is actually so very important to what it is that I'm talking about, right? It's actually the first thing that I should have went over in the first video, but I'm gonna go ahead and go through it right now, right? And that first thing that you need to know is you need to know what racism is. You know what I mean? And I know that sounds crazy to a lot of people, because a lot of people probably look at racism kind of like an elementary topic, right? It's something you learn about when you're in grade school, right? But the thing about that, what they teach you in grade school compared to what it actually is completely and utterly different. What they teach you in grade school about racism is that basically it's name calling. Basically, it's you saying things that are not nice to another group of people. You know what I mean? And not so much the structural, systematic aspect of it, right? Which is what a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people don't get that racism is a system. It's an industry. It's a structure. It's not something you can simply turn on and off. You can't speak about anything that has anything to do with society without race having some sort of element or some sort of impact on what it is that's going on in that particular topic. And it goes all the way across the board, y'all. I mean, you name it. I ain't gonna name them now, but you name it in your head. Anything that you can think of, racism has something to do with it. You know what I mean? We are a country built on racism. So for people to get mad and upset at guys like Dontaes Boxing Nation for bringing race into boxing, I mean, I find that just laughable, honestly. You know what I mean? Because Dontaes Boxing Nation isn't the guy who brings race into boxing. Boxing brings race into boxing. But beyond that, the system in which we live in brings race into boxing. You know what I mean? So, how can you be mad at a guy like Dontaes Boxing Nation for speaking on the racism that exists within boxing? Why not be mad at the racism that exists within boxing? That's the thing about this that I never get from a lot of these dudes that get mad at guys like Dontaes Boxing Nation for speaking about the racism that exists within boxing. It's like, be mad at the racism. Don't be mad at the guy speaking about the racism. Nevertheless, I digress. I think you got a good understanding on what racism actually is. It's a system, it's a structure, it's an industry, it's a machine. You can't simply turn it on and off. Racism is in everything. All right? Point blank, period. Cool. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into the last three things you need to know prior to the meat and potatoes of the actual topic, right? Okay, so the fifth thing that you should know prior to us getting into the meat and potatoes of the actual video is that, and this one gonna hurt a lot of feelings, man. This one gonna hurt a lot of feelings. But it is what it is. It's just the truth. It's just the truth. Anybody who says shit like the race card or race baiter or victim mentality, anybody who says shit like that, they're either ignorant to systematic racism or they're a complete sellout. You know what I'm saying? Like, this gonna hurt people's feelings. It is what it is, bro. When I did if you check out part one, at the beginning of part one, I said, look, man, some people gonna want to unsubscribe from your boy after all this. Some people ain't gonna like your boy, ain't gonna rock with your boy after all this. But it is what it goddamn is. I got to tell it like it is, goddamn. And the facts are the facts. Because in order for you to be a race baiter, right, it means that you would have to insert race into a topic that race doesn't belong. But the problem with that term, race baiter, it means that you're saying race isn't in every aspect of life when it actually is. You know what I mean? If you're saying somebody's pulling the race card, essentially you're saying that race isn't in every aspect of society when it is. You know what I mean? How can someone play a race card when the card's already been played? The card is inserted into the computer. The card is there. You know what I mean? You can't play a race card in a society that's built on race. You know what I mean? So anybody who uses the word race baiter, anybody who says race card, they're either ignorant to the realities of life in world, in politics, or they're simply a sellout and a coon, bruh. Point blank period. I mean, you can't name me any part of society, any aspect of life. You can't name me any aspect of life that doesn't involve race. You can't name me one topic that doesn't have anything to do with race. Not even one. But you want to criticize channels like Dontaes Boxing Nation. You know what I mean? You want to criticize LBC and things like that for talking about race, when you can't name me one thing that has nothing to do with race. Not one. It all really comes down to the fact that anybody who says race baiter, play the race card, anybody who really says shit like that, really all they're trying to do is deflect the conversation. That's really all they're trying to do. You know what I mean? Dudes like that can't never argue whatever the talking point is. They can't ever argue the topic. So they use words like race baiter and play the race card in order to deflect the actual topic. So at the end of the day, it's all a deflection. It's all something to take your mind off of the reality of the situation at the end of the goddamn day. And these are just facts. I haven't even gotten to my opinion yet, y'all. I haven't even gotten to my opinion. These are all just facts. I haven't gotten none of my opinion on this shit. You feel me? Nevertheless, I digress. I think y'all get the point. Let's go on and move on to the sixth thing that y'all should know prior to this interview with SHAKUR Stevenson, right? And the sixth thing that y'all should know is that perception is damning. Perception is damning in boxing. Why is perception damning? Because when media presents a boxer as the best boxer, right? When they make these declarations and they promote fighters in certain ways, these fighters are able to garner certain advantages socially, because a lot of this is social, right? They're able to garner certain advantages socially that other fighters just simply don't get. You know what I mean? We exist right now in a society of boxing right now where you got a lot of people not fighting each other. You got a lot of fighters that are ducking, dodging, maneuvering, and pivoting their way to fuck up out of certain fights. But why do you think they're able to get away with doing things like that? Right? Why do you think they're able to get away with not fighting the best competition? They're able to get away with not fighting the best competition because the public perceives these guys as the best. Therefore, they don't necessarily need to fight anybody who would be perceived to be under them, right? For years at a time, Canelo Alvarez was perceived to be the number one pound for pound fighter, even though he got dominated by Floyd Mayweather. Even though he got a gift decision versus Erislandy Lara. Even though he got a gift decision versus Triple G twice. Even though he ducked Demetrius Andrade, ducked Jermall Charlo, ducked Jermell Charlo, tested positive for steroids. Even though all these things happened with Canelo Alvarez, he was still portrayed as pound for pound number one by the media. Therefore, his actions were able to be justified by the media because he's the best fighter, right? Even though the narrative always changes, right? Because when it's someone else who's perceived as the best fighter, they have to fight all their competition. They don't necessarily get the same privileges that somebody like a Canelo Alvarez would get, right? But what do you attribute that to? None other than race, right? It would have to be race. Nevertheless, to my original point, we exist within a society where the perceived best fighter is able to get certain privileges and advantages that other fighters don't get. And they're able to justify their actions by doing so. Lomachenko, after 11 or 12 fights and a loss to Salido, was somehow perceived as the #1 pound for pound fighter. How do you figure that? Chocolatito was somehow perceived as the #1 pound for pound fighter. How do you figure that? And this goes back to black people always having to work so much harder and achieve so much more and do so much better than their white counterparts in order to get the recognition that they deserve. You may not like Floyd Mayweather, but Floyd Mayweather beat all the best competition there was out there. He beat all the best competition there was out there. You can say whatever you want to say about Floyd Mayweather. But even up until now, Floyd Mayweather doesn't get the credit that he deserves as a guy who fought and beat the best. But as his skin was, if his skin complexion was a little fairer, if his hair was a little straighter, if his eyes were a little lighter, you can't sit there and tell me it would be the same. You can't sit there and tell me Floyd Mayweather would have needed to accomplish as much in order to get the same recognition. The facts just don't line up with what the fuck you talking about. Because we're looking at a guy like Canelo Alvarez right now, who's getting the same level of recognition somebody like a Floyd Mayweather would get for doing far less in far less impressive fashion. So the racial double standards are there. It's always been there. It will always, hopefully it won't always be there, but it will always be there for the foreseeable future in my eyes. You want to be mad at Dontaes Boxing Nation? You should be mad at the racism that exists within society. You should be mad at society itself for allowing the racism to exist within its power structure. Nevertheless, I digress. Let's go ahead and move on to the seventh and final thing that y'all need to know prior to us jumping into this Shakur Stevenson interview. Right? Okay, cool. So the seventh and final thing y'all need to know prior to us getting into the meat and potatoes of this topic is that there's a difference between selling out and pandering. You can pander without selling out, but you can't sell out without pandering. Nevertheless, they're two completely different things. You know what I mean? When you pander, a panderer is somebody who is like a salesperson. If you work in sales, chances are you do a little bit of pandering. You know what I mean? Chances are you change your tone up a little bit in order to appease your audience. Chances are you act a certain way in order to come off as professional, right? Chances are you look a certain way in order to come off presentable. Chances are you make eye contact and you use different body cues and things in order to give off a certain energy or a certain image. That's actually pandering. You're pandering because you don't normally speak that way. You don't normally look that way. You don't normally act that way. But you're doing this in order to come off more appealing to either another person or another group of people, right? So that's what pandering is. And I'm going to put up the definition right here. But selling out is actually much, much, much different. Much different. A sellout is somebody who's betrayed his own people. A sellout is somebody who works against his own people or group. A sellout is somebody who works in the detriment of his own people or group. Okay? A Judas is what a sellout is. Much more dangerous, much more destructive, much more impactful. Two completely different things, y'all. So I just need y'all to know first and foremost that there's a big difference between pandering and selling out. You know what I mean? So that is the 7th thing, man. So, I hope you enjoyed this so far, man. I'm really trying to set the stage for when I break down SHAKUR Stevenson's interview about Dontaes Boxing Nation. You know what I mean? So I need y'all to understand all 7 of the things that I done went down the list about. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So I'm going to go ahead and wrap the video up right here, man. Let me know what your thoughts is in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. And everybody, and I do mean everybody, be sure to hit that goddamn like button. But until next time, I'm going to holler at y'all. Peace.
Man, sit your ass down.